So now I'm going to do some basic cross stitch tutorial to show you kind of how I would stitch this design. So I've got my pattern here, I've got a pair of scissors, I've got a pen, and then I've got my threaded needle with my 3 strands of thread as called for by my thread card. And I've got the symbol here, this symbol here, and this symbol here. So we're going to be working on this symbol first. Now I'm going to find the center of my pattern, and it's roughly here. So the closest one to that symbol is around here. So I'm going to start around here. So I'm going to find the center of my fabric here, and then I'm just going to poke my needle through round about just slightly right of the center, because that's where I'm starting my stitch from. So now I've got my needle coming up through from the back, up through to the front, and now I'm just going to pull that through until there's about a 2 to 3 centimeter tail on the back. So you see that tail there. And then I'm going to put my thread through the diagonally opposite holes. So see, we've got 4 holes here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go through this diagonally opposite hole here. And I'm going to pull it gently through, because I don't want to pull that tail from the back towards the front. So now I've got my first half stitch. So I'm just going to pull down a little bit more to get that tail to be about 2 centimeters. Now what I want to do to secure this tail on the back is to go into this hole here, right below the one that I just did. And then I want to make sure that I grab that tail and put it under where that loop is going to close down on. So I'm just going to pull down on my loop that I've created, and I'm going to make sure that tail just gets tucked under that loop there, like so. And now our tail is nice and secure, so it's not going to go anywhere. And we have our first diagonal half stitch here. So to complete that as a full stitch, we'll go into the hole diagonally opposite this one here, like so. And then we've got our first cross. So we've made our first cross stitch and our cross stitch. So I'm going to mark off the stitch I just did by crossing it out on my pattern here. So now I've done that one, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 to the side of it. So I'm going to look at my pattern here, and I'm going to do 4 more stitches to the side. Now I'm going to do the other way of stitching, which is to stitch all the halves one way before coming back and doing the other half of the stitch. So I'm going to go through this bottom left hole here, and then up to this top right hole there. I'm going to do that 4 times. I'm going to go down to the bottom, up to the top. Now you want to make sure all your bottom legs of your stitches face the same direction, and all the top legs of your stitches face the same direction. So you always want to be going from left to right and then right to left. But basically just make sure that the top stitch that you do, which I'm going to do in a second. So now that I've done those 4 bottom stitches, I like to always go from bottom right to top left with my stitches. You can do it the other way, it doesn't matter which way, but just make sure that they all go the same way. So you want to make sure they go from bottom left to top, bottom right to top left, or the other way. It doesn't matter, but as long as they all go the same way. And that's just how it looks nice and neat and tidy. And that's those 4 stitches done. So now I can mark those off on my pattern. Now we're going to go down to this next line here now, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they line up with the one above it. So we're just going to do another 5 that line up with this one up here. So I'm going to go again, starting in my bottom left corner and going to my top right. And then I'm just going to go all the way across. Bottom left, top right. Now I'm just going to go finish this thread colour, and then I'll come back and show you how to finish off your thread once you're done with a specific colour. Now, I don't have enough thread to do any more stitches, so I'm just going to complete this last half stitch here, and then I'm going to show you how you finish off your stitch at the back. So once you've got your thread around to the back of your work, you'll flip it over and you'll find your little tail here. So what you want to do is you want to slip your needle under at least 3 finished stitches like that. Then you just want to push it through, pull the needle with the thread under those stitches so it secures that tail of the end of your thread. And you just want to grab your scissors and you want to snip that thread off. And you can go back and snip your starting tail too. Now we're going to start another thread by grabbing our 3 strands of thread, which we've already separated out. So we have our 3 strands here. We're going to thread those onto our needle. Now we've got it threaded. Now, because we're going to start back down here where we were just working, what we're going to do is we're going to use that same technique of sliding our needle under a few stitches at the back to secure our thread. So we'll just pull it through some stitches, leave a little bit of a tail, and then you can now start your stitch again at the front, going bottom to top. Now for this first stitch, I just wouldn't tug too hard while you're securing it in place. But once that one's in place, it should be pretty secure and you can just keep stitching as normal. Now you can start and end all your stitches like this, and you don't have to try and trap the tail like I showed you at the beginning. That's usually just for the first stitch where you're starting. Okay. Now that I've finished the black colour on the 310, I'm going to move on to the other colour. Now, because I know this is a pair of jandals, I'm going to actually follow the colour like the strap that it is, so going around when I follow the colour, so starting here and going around and doing the strap as it naturally would. Now, normally I would recommend working in lines of colour, so as you saw when I was doing the black, I would work left to right and fill in the squares as lines. But that doesn't really work very well for these because they're spaced so far apart and you'd end up wasting a lot of thread. So I would recommend, where you can, just going for the next closest of that colour. So in this case, you would go from this one to this one and then up and up and then around and going around. Now for these, it makes sense to just do it in rows. So you'll kind of get the hang of what works best and what is best for not making a big mess of thread on the back as well. Now, so we are working on 498, or this red colour, and it is the sort of broken wine glass looking one. So we're going to find that on our thread card again. We're going to unhook it from the edge, wind out about 30 centimetres, and then we're going to clip that back in and cut off what we're going to use. Now we're going to remember that it says to use 3 strands, and so we're going to grab our 3 strands out of this bundle here. So we're going to grab 1, 2, and 3. Now that 3 is also 3, and that can be used the next time you need to change your threads. So I'll grab these 3 and line them all up. And then we're going to thread our needle. Now, if they're not quite lined up and you don't want to sit there and fiddle with it for ages, you can actually just use your scissors to trim them so that they line up nicely at both ends. So just trim the little bit extra fluffy bits off the ends. But these are reasonably well lined up, so we're going to thread our needle like so. And then we're just going to go, we're going to start over here. So that's over here. So then you go around to your back and pass this under about 3 stitches near where you're about to start stitching. Put that in like that. Stop. Find the stitch. It's this one here, which is this one here on your fabric. You're going to push your needle through that bottom left hole. Pull it through. Don't pull too hard because you'll pull that secured end out. Go through the top right hole. Make your cross. And then bottom. And back to the top. And then we've done that first stitch, and we're just going to mark that off here. And now we've got to go diagonally across one up to here. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, all on top of one another. And because I'm just following this curve, I'm just going to do one at a time, and I'm not going to do them the half leg and then go and do the second leg after I've done the 3. So I'm just going to do each stitch by itself. Now you'll see I'll go and start in a different corner. That's because if I started in that bottom corner, it's just going to undo the stitch I've just done. But as long as the legs face the same way, that's the main thing. That's what you're looking for. A little bit of fluff from the back has come through, so I was just going and pulling that back through to the back. So you just want to make sure, no matter which direction you stitch, so I'm starting in here, the top right going to bottom left, that this top leg always goes in the same direction, either left to right or right to left. So in this case, it's going right to left. Doesn't matter whether I start in the top or bottom. So I could also start up here, as long as I'm going left to right, right to left, and that the leg is just following that same direction. It's slanted in the same direction. Now we're just going diagonally this left one over here. Then we will go another one up. Okay, now we've finished our little Jandals kit, and you should hopefully now know the basics of cross stitching.